Yeah, it's a little different this week. Sort of. This is a episode of a very different color. And will be.
I can tell you one time, don't want it with us. I can tell you one time, that we'll fuck you up. I can tell you one time, go grab your guns. I'll tell you one time, this day belongs to Washington.
What a week. I love that intro. I cut it just a little bit short. I need to remaster that slightly just to make it a little bit shorter. But, hello, good evening, and welcome to the War Room. This is day 170 of Russia's incursion into the Ukraine. And you catch us at an odd time because today's episode is going to be slightly different, as you heard from the intro. If you didn't know what that was, that is a nuclear fallout siren, and the thumbnail should give you an idea what we're going to be talking about today. All jokes aside, I had decided to shove all the stories of the week sort of off the table because there was a repeat of several stories throughout the last couple of days that sort of motivated me to want to talk about this. So before we get into it, let me go ahead and drag in my other panelists. I was hoping to have 3, but I've got 2. So it's going to be the 3 of us tonight. If the 4th gets here, that'd be great. He'll just be the last part of the panel. But then again, I'm not sure if YouTube's analytics are working right now, so chances are if you're not seeing this live, then you're probably catching this on the replay, which is fine too. If you're in the live part tonight right there or right now though, go ahead and say something in the chat because my analytics page is not working as far as I can tell. Anyway, let me drag them in. So right now I've got Mikhail Knightstrikesky and I have Scott P79, both of prior Gun Channel's fame or infamy, depending on
Scott would be infamous.
depending on what part of the argument you guys got stuck in. But anyway, I wanted to talk about, I guess, the 800-pound radioactive elephant in the room, and that is repeated stories this week of Russia attacking the Zaporizhzhia nuclear facility. Now, if you think that you're having a case of deja vu, it is because they had attacked it before. And I was going to share a picture of it, but I've got other pictures to show you because it doesn't matter when they did it. It just know that they have done it before and they're doing it again, either out of frustration or this is a new military doctrine of trying to scare everyone into compliance for fear
This
of
is
nuclear
madness.
fallout. It could be a bit of madness. I mean, I'm not going to dismiss that idea. The older Vladimir Putin gets, the more possibly unhinged he can become. We've heard repeated stories of the possibility of him having a rare form of blood cancer, I think it was, which would make him a bit more desperate to leave behind his legacy in history because he is quite the egotist. some of you may have heard me in the past in lobby chats and whatnot uh, discuss that I once had an admiration for Vladimir Putin as a world leader, just
Well,
in the sense
jokingly,
of,
everybody did when we saw pictures of him riding a bear.
well, stuff like that, right? I mean, it's like you look at a guy who runs his country like that. Now, obviously, we got the PR propaganda pictures or whatever, but you see it and you're like, yeah, that's what a leader should look like, not some buffoon hiding in a basement, babbling
During
things
COVID.
about the thing.
You mean some idiot that's gotten the coup like 4
All
times?
men and women created by go. You know the thing.
See, I'm glad he picked up on that because I was hoping he was going to do that as I said that. I kind of led him into that one. Yes, thank you for doing that.
Well,
But I thought, that's what a leader in command looks like. But unfortunately, he's lost
we
his
had our own
fucking
version.
marbles, right?
I think we had our own version. He's under attack right now. We have Trump.
Correct. Correct. And that is a week in review within itself. Unfortunately,
Exactly.
I've committed to doing the war room rather than my old week in review. Someday when this war is over, we'll go back to doing that because that was more fun. We could talk about gun related stories, 2A stories, and just stuff like that. Exactly. How the Orange Man is still bad somehow. Mean tweets. Terry is there. Okay, so thank
I'm
you
rolling my
for
eyes as you say that.
yeah, thank you for validating that my analytics page is broken. Um, so yeah, the story of the week that's really bugging me is that the Russians are attacking Zaporizhzhia again. Uh, Let me share with you a picture or two. This is a photo here of the aftermath of being shelled, and as you can see, it's burning and smoking profusely. Um, but you're not getting a good shot of the plant itself. Obviously several miles away, and it's to give you a sense of scale. Whereas, I think the most important part is this is a close up of the actual power station, and as you can see, Zaporizhzhia has 6 reactors all lined up like dominoes. They're all right next to each other, one after the other after the other. As you can see there, there's six towers right there. Um, Chernobyl, on the other hand, had 4 reactors, and they were spread out across the complex. They weren't lined up like this. So today's story or today's episode, I want to talk about a couple of what ifs, and I gave Scott and I gave Mike here the kind of rundown of how I wanted to do it. But I guess what I'll do is I'll vomit out my idea, get it all out there, and then you guys can sort of use that as a template of how you would present your thoughts on this. That way, we sort of have a semblance of a format, I guess is a good way to put it. So,
Format, huh?
just sort of. So anyway, here's another photo. This is, just guards at the reactor. He's standing in front of one. It gives you a sense of scale of how each reactor building is, or how it's laid out, or how big it is, or how tall it is. The stairs, the little zigzag stairs on the right, give you a sense of height. Um, Soldier there gives you a sense of width, stuff like that. So I just wanted to give you those, something to look at type things. I just thought of something. I forgot to add a picture in, didn't I? Oh no, I just forgot to name it. Okay, let me rename this one. Okay, there we go. So I did do my show prep properly. The one thing that is the same from all my previous episodes is the scroller is up to date, and the tanks statistic right there is what's most impressive, because I think it was 75 or 78 tanks they knocked out in a single week. That's something. That's an effect. And Scott, you brought up a great point. You were like, how many more tanks do they have left before they run out? Because
I mean, make the joke. Tanks a lot.
thank you very much. Um, But yeah, 1,875 tanks have been knocked out since this began back in February. How many do you think they've got?
Well, they
Because,
sold all their T-72s to the Middle East, so you know.
well, some, and they had, was it T90s or
They did-
92s, which are the upgraded Dolly Parton 72s?
basically the 72Bs, yeah.
Right. So they're using those.
Oh no, they're out of them. From what I
Yeah,
heard.
1,875 tanks have been knocked, or 18. Yeah, I think it's 1,875, right? The scroller's about to show us again.
Yeah.
That's,
T-92.
that's a lot of damn
T-92
tanks. And then they started digging into the dredges of their
They're using the
reserve.
T-64s now. I think.
They were using T-62As and T-62s and T-55s.
Yeah.
The last time I saw a T-55 being fielded by the Russians was
during a North Korean parade.
well, no, it was in a movie, but it was in
The Cold War.
Afghanistan, and it was called the Beast of War. That's the same tank.
Uh-huh.
They're still using those. They have brought
Yeah.
those back out of reserve, which is frankly incredible
Yeah.
because they have no nuclear protection, they have no biological protection, they have what you would probably consider first generation tank armor. It's not spaced armor, it's not chobum, it's not ceramic plate, it's
Regular old steel.
good old fashioned steel, which an what is it? AP,
Javelin will go through like a hot knife through butter.
an APIDS round, which is what the Leopard 2A1 uses. It's what the M1 Abrams uses, and it's what the British Challenger 2 uses.
I'm
120
just
millimeter.
waiting. I'm just waiting until they get so desperate that they have to pull the T-34s out of mothball.
They already have them.
They already have. They've pulled a few out. They're using them as transports for munitions, for the shells for the other tanks that they can still run. So they're basically like ammo carriers, armored ammo carriers, and like APCs. And any T-34s that are being fielded right now, they're using T-34 85s, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Not the
Yeah.
76s. And
That's
because they still have a vast stores of old surplus HE rounds for them. So in terms of armored personnel carrier that has a high explosive weapon against infantry, it's still valid. Like that would still work. It ain't gonna do shit
other
against
than
the
their
javelin.
regular APC, which has what, a 20 or 30 millimeter gun.
Yeah, but I mean, like a BMP2 or something. Yeah. But
Yeah.
the thing is it ain't gonna do shit against a javelin. It's not even gonna have. It doesn't have the sensors to detect that they've been lased by a javelin. So it's just like T-34 was there, T-34 is gone. You know, it's like, oops.
Maybe that's why they've been losing so many tanks lately.
Could be.
Wait. Are those missiles marked from the Ukrainians? Marked made in Germany.
No, they're ours.
There are.
Made in the USA.
Yeah, javelins, they're ours.
Hmm.
I forgot what do they
Germany
call
did
them?
give them a bunch of missiles too.
Panzer Shrek 3s or something like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, they sent a ton of those.
And
That
the
would've
Swedes
been
sent them
really
a fuck ton
ironic
of.
If those Panzer Shreks actually hit T-34s, I'm just telling you.
Well, the Swedes also sent them a fuck ton of the Carl Gustaf recoilless rifles.
Yes.
Yeah,
you have to wonder if there were two T-34s in a column, and you fired a freaking Charlie G at it. Wouldn't it just go right through one and blow up into the second one?
Could possibly take out a T-34.
Well, I mean, you see what I'm saying? Like, it would just go through the first one and explode in the second one.
Oh yeah.
That's a bad day if you're a Ruski. Like, if you're a Russian soldier and they're like, okay, listen, we're going into Kherson. You're going to have armored support. Oh, great. Yes, you have to drive it yourself. What? Here's T-34. Are you fucking kidding me? My grandfather drove one of these. His name is still spray painted on the side of it.
Are we fighting the Germans again?
Yeah, no kidding, right? Like they got
They
propaganda
very well might
spray
be
painted
if
on
they
on the
fucking
side,
attacking
Berlin or bust.
The nuclear plant.
Berlin or bust.
That's oh man.
We must raise this is a great Berlin Wall.
When this war started, I told a joke because there was a memorial in Ukraine for their part in the war.
The
Because you have to
Holocaust.
remember, Ukraine, Sevastopol, was the step-off
Mhm.
point for the battle to take back Stalingrad. So the Ukrainians had a big part in it. They had they have a memorial of it, and it was a T-34 tank painted blue and gold. And I thought, okay, which army's going to get desperate enough to steal or use this first? And the answer is
The
Russians. The Russians. It's like, holy shit. I mean, if they start bringing out T-26 Christie tanks, it's over. Because, like,
Or
freaking
Shermans.
Barrett rifles are going to go through that.
They don't have any Shermans left. They got rid of them.
No. But, I mean, T-26
But they did have 'em.
Christies and BTSVs and BT-26s.
You argue with me that they're not gonna use the mouse, but
No.
if they get desperate enough, they will find an engine to put in that. damn
No,
thing. I tell you
they
that
couldn't
right
do it in time. And the thing is that thing is so big and so heavy and so slow that one ATGM could take that out. One freaking Hellfire missile could take that out. It's
now.
too
They use
slow
it as a battery.
You can use it as a roadblock, but why would you waste it? Like, I would think that they would go and take out their Object 279 first. Their nuclear tank with the 4 treads. My favorite tank, period, hands down, bar none. They'll take that out. They'll take out Russian tanks from the Kubinka Tank Museum first. Because every one of
where the
those are in
mouse is.
operation.
What you're saying is
That's where the mouse is.
I know where it is. I've seen it. I've been there. Anyway, you know it's bad if they take out the ball tank, the German ball tank.
I was going to say, they're going to take out the, what is it, Object 237?
That and the 904B. But yeah, for sure. If
The,
they get to that
nuclear
point,
one?
it's over. It's all over. Anyway, looks like Warsaw's in the chat. That's cool. What did I want to talk about before we get into all this? Anyway,
Object 237. That's an IS, isn't it?
maybe the T10 probably would. T10s and IS-7s would definitely make a
It's like an
comeback.
IS-85, I think.
Anyway, so yeah, let's get into the meat and potatoes because we're already 18 minutes in. I promised to try to get everyone out of here within an hour today because I figured this is the only thing we're really going to talk about. So let me set the table for you because you got to have a format, right? So
Right.
I read these stories this week about the Russians shelling Zaporizhzhia, and I've showed you the pictures. I'll put it up again of the 6 reactors there, all lined up like dominoes. And it got me thinking, if one reactor were to fail and go critical or explode, I would imagine one would reason it out and think that there were seismic sensors and radiation sensors for the other reactors to instantly scrum or shut down to save itself. But Russians doing Russian things, they're shelling the whole complex indiscriminately. They're not doing precision strikes. They don't have the capability to do precision strikes anymore. They've lost all of that. I mean,
They're
look
just
at
lobbing in at the enemy.
Yeah, look at the numbers in the scroller. They have already used their good stuff. They're on 4th string garbage now. Now, I'm not saying that that's not still capable. I'm just saying it's not going to hit with the same accuracy like they may have had in the beginning of this back in February. Clinical strikes. Now they're blanketing this area. So it stands to reason that because of the way that these reactors are set up at Zaporizhzhia, if you pepper the area, you have a very high possibility of blowing more than one reactor. Maybe 2, maybe all of them simultaneously because they're all being hit at the same time, right? Which means the sensors can't react to shut them down if they're all being blown up at once. That means it's 6 reactors flipping their lids like a Chernobyl. Because if you remember, Chernobyl's reactor melted down. There was an explosion. It blew the lid off the vault and flipped it like a quarter. Like effortlessly flipped it into the air a couple 100 feet. Like
Right.
it was nothing. Now imagine that times 6. Better yet, this is what I'm leading into. I'll just show you the picture now.
Go ahead.
This is a photo of the effects of the one reactor that mechanically failed at Chernobyl. It wasn't bombed, it wasn't shelled, it wasn't deliberately attacked. This was an accident that went out of control. The reactor went supercritical, blew its lid, and what you're looking at there is the cesium. Cesium was the radioactive material that went into the air. This is the rate of absorption of radiation as compared to a normal dose, a single dose. And at ground zero, the dot, the black dot where it says Chernobyl, it was over 100 times the standard dose tolerable by the human body.
As I was telling you before, we've got that there as a notification of how bad the fallout would be for one reactor.
Wait, I'm
So-
getting there. So the big dark red blob is most of Ukraine. Like a third or more, almost a third of it. And most of Belarus, because you got to remember, Chernobyl is near the northern border. So that's 40 to 100 times the radiation dosage in just that one spot. And if you look, the other spots cover all the way up to northern Finland and Sweden and Norway. And it goes as far south as Greece. And it goes as far east as beyond the United Kingdom and Portugal, right? Basically what this says is one failed
just-
reactor based off of an accident, one failed reactor affected the entirety of Europe. And it was an accident. What we have going on this week is a deliberate attack on a nuclear power plant. And there's 6 reactors. Now, if that much radiation spread from one, how much worse are those colored rings if 6 go up? First of all, the
Multiply that
spread
by
will be
6.
further too, but the concentrations at each ring from the center will obviously be much bigger and much worse because it's 6 times the material that's
You see
being
where
spread.
that area?
Huh?
You see that area where it shows most of Europe?
Yeah.
Problem is that area would be wider, so it would
Right.
creep into half into Russia, like halfway into
Yes,
Russia.
but what
And
I guess my point is
Moscow would get it.
those
Moscow will get it.
colors, the intensity of the colors would be
be much
further
darker.
out. So like the light pink would be much darker red. The very, very, very faint pink would actually be darker red. And then that would spread the
It would spread much further.
yes, because the diminishing parts of it, the very faded parts in that picture, that map, would be much further out, would have a much wider reach, because there's just that much more material being put out there. And here's the other thing. Because it's being attacked, the munitions and the explosions are kicking up more of the radioactive material on the ground into the air. We saw that very, very easily when they were digging trenches around Chernobyl just in March this year during
And
the
then
first
sending
opening.
people to a Belarus radiation treatment center.
Exactly. So they were kicking it up with hand tools. Imagine what's going to happen if it's being kicked up with
Well-
howitzer shells.
When they were fighting around Chernobyl,
Hmm.
before and after, when they were fighting during, they were also kicking up the radioactive dirt that was just on the ground.
Right.
Just because they were running tanks over it.
Sure.
And they were firing shells at it.
Right. Now, imagine what they're doing with, air to ground missiles, artillery shells, tank shells, aerial bombs, stuff like that, right? S-300s, S-400s, just stuff like that. Obviously, the kick up of material is going to be substantially worse. So I'm showing you all this to ask a very basic question. We have all spoken in the past about Article 5. That was hot in the news. It was hot even here at the War Room. We talked about, oh, if they do this in Poland, that's Article 5, and Poland's going to take boots to ass. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I agree. And then Article 5 basically states it's NATO doctrine. An attack on a NATO nation is an attack on all of NATO, which means the response from NATO will come from all of it in kind. So, my question is just off that one photo I'm showing you, with just Chernobyl's fallout, which was an accident, imagine that map 6 times larger, created by a deliberate attack by Russia. That's all the NATO nations of Europe under fallout.
All of Europe.
That's all of Europe. That's all of northern the Baltics. That's going to be
Right.
half of Russia. That's going to bleed into Turkey.
It's got to bleed into Turkey.
It's going to bleed into most of North Africa. It's going to bleed into India.
In Portugal.
The thing is the Himalayas are tall. A lot of that won't make it to China. But China will be scared shitless regardless. Because they're like, we can't go over the mountain now. Because it's glowing on the other side. Now, I'm figuratively speaking. But the Geiger counters will go crazy on the other side of those mountains. Right?
If you're in those areas, you will have thought that the Chinese invaded Anchorage.
Well, you'll be sick. First of all.
That too.
So
if you survive, obviously.
So the question that I'm trying to raise. Oh, Jaime is here. Let me pull him in. There's our fourth. So I don't know if you were listening earlier, Jaime, but I'm sort of setting the table for the format. Since you got here last, I'll let you go last so that way you can hear kind of this format from Mike and Scott first, and then you can chime in with your ideas, your thoughts too. So the question I'm trying to raise is if this happens, because NATO today, or the UN today on the record, said this is one of the darkest hours in European history due to the fear of what's going on from the Russians doing this. Like, what could potentially happen? They're thinking the same thing I'm talking about. I'm just saying it out loud. My question is, will this event, will this nuclear fallout finally provoke NATO and NATO will drag the rest of the world into what everyone thought it was, World War III? Will it finally become the global conflict that most people already realize it is, but most pundits are just trying to not say the quiet part out loud because they think that if you don't talk about it, it's not real? Where I think, look, it's happening all around us. We're just not directly involved by name. But if you think about what's going on, we are doing exactly what we did in the first 2 world wars. We are feeding the war machine. We are proxy fighting this war already. We have already been accused of this by Russia's diplomats. They're like, look, we keep saying that if you do this, you're going to offend us, and you keep worrying that if you do something, that's going to offend us. But let's not make any mistake. You're in this war already, whether you want to admit it or not. Because the missiles that are shooting down our planes say made in America. Or the bullets that are killing our soldiers are made in America. They're AAC. Or the AKs that are being used by the Ukrainians that are being donated from your country have Palmetto State Armory logos on them. Or just whatever, right? That cannot be denied. That's a fact. Nobody can deny that. We have admitted it. We have proudly announced it every time. Say it. Put it up there. Play the button. The man in charge of the AFT.
Oh yes.
That guy.
The AFT.
That guy. He announces it publicly. We're sending $500 billion worth of military equipment. We're sending ATGMs. We're sending javelins. We're sending
hymns.
We're sending brass bullets and bandages. We're sending whatever you ask for that we think you need within reason. But we're not sending you the tools that will give you the 480-kilometer range necessary to attack Moscow. Yeah, I did the math. 480 kilometers. We will stop just short of doing that. So yeah, the question is, will the fallout drag NATO into an Article 5 response? My thoughts are yes, it will. Second part of that question, will that drag the rest of the world into a world war? And again, I think my answer is yes, it will. And I'll explain. Every world war starts the same way so far. We've had 2, and I'm going off of the example of 2. Something happens in a smaller country, geopolitically speaking, that triggers an event that forces belligerent nations to declare war on each other. And once they do that, then the propaganda machine starts spinning up, and then they start sort of twisting the arm of all their neighbors and allies and friends or cohorts, and they say, it's time for you to choose a side. You are either with us in this or against us in this. That's how world wars have started. Both of them. So the question is, does the NATO Article 5 response drag the rest of the world into the world war? The answer is yes. And this is how. NATO nations get involved. The European NATO nations, if their troops and infantry aren't sick from radiation, those who are fighting will immediately start asking for assistance from other nations. Look what they did to us. If they do it to us, they'll do it to you once we fall. So nations like the United States, Canada, maybe Spain, maybe France, they will start twisting the arms of former colonial, holdings all across the world and say, "Are you with us?" Because right now, who's one of the safest countries in this conflict right now? Australia, strangely enough. Now, yes, China has threatened Australia, but let's just take China out of the picture of this theater of operation, the RTO, the Russian theater of operation, right? Let's look at that. Australia's pretty safe. They're so far away from this, they're pretty safe. But you could be assured that the United Kingdom would immediately make 2 phone calls. Canada, Australia, send us what you got. We need it now, by the order of the Queen. Or by the order of the Prime Minister. Or by the order of who the fuck ever. You know for a fact they will start asking for that. Do you think Canada's going to say, sorry, we don't want to get involved? No. They're involved already. Because Canada still recognizes the crown. Yes, they have a Prime Minister who's a loser and he's better served as a male underwear model or something. Anyway.
He needs to go back to his home country.
Maybe.
Cuba.
Maybe. But the fact of the matter is if England comes calling, Canada will answer. Without a doubt. Australia absolutely will answer. Those guys are itching for a fight. They've been screwed with long enough by what's going on just north of them. So, yeah, I think they feel like they have something to prove. The one nation that I think won't answer the call, strangely enough, India. I don't think they would answer that call. If you look at the way they've been behaving since this all began, have you noticed that they have not been very vocal despite the fact that they're literally stuck between both fronts? They're right in the middle. Stuck in the middle with you. They're stuck there. And they're stuck with their pants down. Because if you think about it, they're what you would call an emerging country right now. They were once considered third world. Now they're pretty first world. Their middle class is growing at an exponential rate. Their affluent class has exploded, right?
Yeah, but the vast majority of the country is
there's still a lot of poor, yes. But see, that's the thing.
Well,
the rich and the affluent will draft the poor into the military out of necessity.
And I
But
By
really
look,
G
want to fireball
standards,
those
look at the way
scammers.
it looks on paper, though, right? They're desperate to stay out of this because they're still in the process of building their military. They're still trying to build aircraft carriers. They're still trying to like lease and build submarines. They're still building a navy. They're still building an army. They're still modernizing that. They're not ready for this, which is why they're not saying a whole lot right now because they're just kind of hoping that nobody's paying attention. Like, okay, you Russians, you keep going you keep going west, and you Chinese, you keep going east, and you forget
Well, they're
India's right here.
hoping we'll wipe each other
well,
out,
the
and then they can
problem
come in
the
and
problem
take
is
over.
that India.
Maybe. But see, what I'm saying is they're not answering the call. They
Well,
can't yet.
well, the thing is that they have aggression towards the Chinese, and the other thing is that by during their certain GDP standards, uh, they're still considered third world at best.
Ah,
No, because listen, by GDP standards,
yeah,
because they're supposed to give in certain amount of money. If they're not giving a
sure.
certain amount, this based on of how much loans we give them. So
Right.
if they militarily, it doesn't matter. They can have a military so grand, but the thing is that can they fuel it by money? Can they back it up with money? The answer is no.
No, they back it up with trade deficit or trade
Well,
surplus or whatever.
well, yeah, but that goes into hand in hand with GDP.
I think one would argue that if anything, see, you never hear second world nation. You always hear third world or first world. I would argue that they're second world on the fast track to first world because you know what India's biggest export is actually globally?
Mm.
Physicians, doctors.
Well,
I was
that's
They
going
not.
to say computer engineers.
no, doctors, actual doctors and surgeons, they are the biggest exporter of those in the world right now. That is their
Yeah, but
number one export.
that's not considered a major value. That's like saying half of the Mexicans that jump the border play soccer, and the most of the good ones are on the American player soccer team.
No, but doctors and surgeons are sort of needed everywhere. That's
Well, why?
that's not
Well,
really an elective thing,
no, but
career.
the thing is, that understand is that those surgeons are either going to Britain, Europe, or the United States.
Yes.
They're not directly affecting India
Uh,
in any certain. They're not.
I would argue that a lot of them are doing what a lot of Mexicans do when they work in the United States. They send a lot of money back home. Because remember, you gotta
Well,
remember, Indian
that is very
culture
true.
is very family centric. They have large families. Now, one would argue that the reason they have large families is the same reason that a lot of more destitute countries in Africa have large families. It's because they need them to work the land or the farms or whatever to sustain whatever they have, what little they have. But the fact remains, people work abroad, they send money back home, they take care of their family. That's a good family ethic. That's not something you breed out very easily. They're generationally that's what they do, right? I mean, when you talk about
That
Asian culture, that's like parents living with their children in their older age, much like my situation. That's commonplace in Asian culture. That's what you do, right? Now the only
no, no.
difference is usually the parents take care of the children to make sure that the children are successful, so that way when the parents get old, the children have the money to float the adults. But see, my folks didn't do that. Anyway, I'm not bitter. Um, anyway, I'm tangenting. We're talking about nuclear fallout and war.
All right.
My point is just that one simple question. Does this possibility of reactors going up and the nuclear fallout and the poisoning and the radiation and the cesium in the air, Greta Thunberg grows a fifth eye. She can't say how dare you anymore because she's turning into a ghoul, that kind of thing. Does that drag NATO into a global conflict? My answer,
No.
yes. Does that action drag the rest of the world into World War III and we stop pussyfooting it around calling it something else? I argue yes, because everyone's going to start calling on their business partners and allies, whether they're in NATO or not, and say, you need to choose if you're with us or against us. Because that's how world wars work. Deals are
Yeah.
made in that moment. Because if you're with us, then the military industrial complex kicks off. And that saves economies if you think about it. Every time we've been involved in a war, the military industrial complex, Rosie the Riveter, enter your platitude here, they they make economies boom temporarily because everyone has to go to work towards a common goal. Now, yes, after the war is over and reparations are supposedly dealt out and reconstruction costs start to be doled out, a recession generally follows a world war. That's happened twice. But the moment of prosperity during the war and the patriotism that increases during the war and the protest, obviously, on the other side of that, the emotions run high on either side. You cannot deny the cliche I have said countless times. Nothing reprioritizes humanity faster than a world war. So I would say yes, NATO gets involved. Yes, the world finally admits what's in front of them and they all get involved. I'm
And
not speculating on how long it's going to last or what it's going to do. I'm just saying yes, I think that's what's going to happen.
and I argue that unless Article 5 states that being covered in nuclear fallout, is an act of war,
No, see,
they won't.
we talked about this off air and I would argue that it absolutely does.
You would,
Because
you would. Great, you
because
do. But the
because
problem with
9/11 is the same thing, okay? We the World Trade Center was not a military target and it was attacked and over 3,000 people died. That was an act of war. What was really strange about this act of war was NATO and the UN and the United States and whoever else declared war on an army that had no nation, who had no flag of a nation. They had a flag of an organization that
Which
was
makes it not an act of war.
Right.
well, but
It makes it an act of terrorism.
okay, but they still did it, and it was still an act of. They still declared war
yes,
on terrorism, which
they
was
did.
a nation, which was an army that flew a flag without a nation. They
declared
invaded
war
other
on something
nations.
abstract. When have they ever done that? Oh, I remember.
Everything
you
after
heard
World
of
War
the-
II.
Have you heard of the war on drugs?
That's
Okay,
oof.
maybe that's abstract too.
That's a
A war on drugs, and look how that
NATO
ended.
didn't declare a war on drugs.
yeah.
The United
It
States
was
did.
an
No,
The
the United
DEA
it
States
was
did.
did. We are
yeah.
NATO. Don't give me.
No, the
We have
NATO didn't
partners
do
in
it. The
NATO,
UN
yes,
didn't do it.
but we
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 provide the
run
bulk
NATO.
of the combat forces
Don't
and transport.
do not kid yourselves. We run NATO. Period.
We
Okay.
influence
Well,
it heavily. Yes,
when we actually have a president that has balls.
that's true. That's
Exactly.
absolutely true.
Absolutely. But
Anyway, here's the other thing. I think we. I don't know if we. I think we sort of delved into it before we went on air. Then we talked about response, and I know, Mike, before I left work, you talked about this, and I was like, "Ooh, save that for the show, right?"
uh-huh.
So, I guess I'm going to let you do yours next because you're going to talk about what you think would happen when it comes to nuclear weapons. So, I'm done for now about
Well,
how I feel
not
about this. So,
nuclear
you go ahead
weapons,
and give us your perspective on what you're seeing.
but with if Russia continues to fire on nuclear targets,
Mhm.
as in reactors and whatnot,
Mhm.
the only response would be, instead of letting Russia just do it all one-sided, the response would be to have Ukraine fire on Russian nuclear power plants.
That's
And
what we talked about. That's right. That's right.
and again, I'm gonna screen share here real quick so we have visuals.
All right.
'Cause
Let me
because-
click on you so I can get it full screen.
There
There you go.
are three certain reactors, reactor locations where they could possibly fire on.
Are you sharing
you
it?
can. I'm getting to it. I'm prefacing it. Okay, hold on.
Okay.
And the issue is that each of these reactor locations are different. Okay, the first one is
Oh, let me pull it
Rostov
up.
nuclear
Hang on, let me
power
pull it up.
plant. Right
There you
here.
go.
Okay, and I just want to. I'm going to preface this because I got notes here. Okay,
Sure.
so Rostov
Oh, he's
nuclear power
prepared.
has 4 operational reactors at it. They have one that they've shut down.
So they're a lot like Chernobyl. 4 reactors.
Well, not shut down, but they're
offline.
Idled.
offline. Okay.
Sure.
Now that's Rostov, and it's a little out there because it's but it's straight east of Mariupol. You see right there. Now, Novorossiysk, that's different. Look how close that is in relation to, say, Kharkiv or eastern Ukraine, right there.
Wiggle your cursor across the map.
It's right here.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
That's where the nuclear power plant is. And the worst thing about Novorossiysk is they've got
It's 200 miles northeast of Kharkiv.
listen, they've got 3 reactors that they've shut down, 4 operational, and 2 that they're planned to build.
So they have 9 reactors on that site?
Yeah.
Wait, how many are shut down?
3.
And how many are active?
4.
Okay, so they have 4 reactors in. The
They have
shutdown
4
ones, that means they're not fueled, so they're
not
4.
fueled, but they're planning to.
Okay, so there's still
build
4
more.
running though.
But you think, well, those are too far away. Well, then we get to the last one. The one in
You were
Kursk.
prepared. Well done. Okay.
The one in Kursk, and that's right here.
Uh-huh.
And I'm pretty sure Ukrainian forces could get close enough to fire a rocket or missiles that way without getting interfered with.
Does your
I'm telling you right now.
Can you read that at the bottom? Is that 20 miles on the scale down there?
I
The
don't
bottom right
know.
corner. Bottom right corner.
Right
The
corner.
scale down at the bottom, very bottom, right there. Does that say 20 miles?
It's just 20 miles, so it's about.
So you're saying from Sumy to there, Kursk.
Yeah.
We're looking at 40-ish miles.
Maybe 60.
Okay. Well, remember we talked about this earlier. The Germans sent over Panzerhaubitze 2000s. They have a 67-kilometer range.
Here's the thing with Kursk, okay? Kursk has 1 reactor that's shut down.
Mm-hmm.
They have 3 that are operational,
Mm-hmm.
2 under construction,
Mm-hmm.
and they're planning to build 2 more.
Right. Okay. So the built ones and the offline ones don't matter right now because they're not the ones that are fueled or running.
Planned ones aren't an issue, and neither is the offline ones. The ones that are under construction or operational are the ones you really need to worry about.
Correct.
Because we don't know what stage of construction they're at, 1, and 2, if they have 3 operational. You saw how bad Chernobyl, which Chernobyl's over this area. I think it's actually.
I want to expand on something real quick. From Sumy to Kursk, the exact mileage. Can you look that up right quick? Give me the mileage from Sumy to Kursk.
Yeah, hold on. Let me give me.
Because a Panzerhaubitze 2000 can fire, what is it, 3 shells in 9 seconds?
You're looking at 163 kilometers.
Oh, that's way far out. Okay, that ain't gonna reach then. Because I thought that was
The
only
U.S.
I thought that was only about
miles.
40 miles. That's
about
100.
The U.S.
100
has
miles.
given them 155 millimeter howitzers.
Right, but they don't have the same
And-
range.
The U.S. has just deployed, at least with our forces,
Mhm.
ramjet assisted 155 millimeter howitzer rounds
Yeah, those could probably get it. But
Well, no,
but
because
my-
see, that's the thing.
to extend
Biden-
their range.
Biden has
Let me
deliberately limited the munitions range because he
Right, but-
didn't want Ukraine attacking mainland Russia.
let me finish. It doesn't matter whether Biden did this, that, or the other. The guy has no idea where he is at any given moment. That's why he says stuff like this.
But he knows what he's sending.
Go, Brandon. I agree.
He knows what he's sending, though. That's my point.
No, he doesn't.
No, he
Well,
doesn't.
because
No,
he's
he
not the
doesn't.
one sending it. It's the people who are carrying the
Exactly.
packages, and he authorizes it. He
My
said, "Look, I
point-
don't want weapons that can reach mainland Russia."
My point
And the
is,
people that fucking supply the weapons say, "Yeah, we're not listening to him.
No, that's the
He doesn't
problem.
know
You
what any
see,
of this shit
General
means."
Milley is
They'll
that
sign off
guy.
on it.
Milley
My
is
point-
that guy. The other
my
guy,
point is,
I forget
if
the
the
other guy.
Ukrainians wanted to prove a point and make the Russians stop attacking the
They absolutely could.
the reactor,
Yeah.
what they would do is they would target, and they've got better missiles and artillery. They could target Kursk,
Mhm.
and they could just do on the outskirts of Kursk, away from the nuclear reactor, and they could just shell that for an entire day, and then the Russians would stop. I'm telling you right now, the Russians
See,
would fucking stop, because the Russians don't
maybe.
want a nuclear meltdown.
See, that's
And
my point, though. You see,
they
do
don't
you
even
really
have to
want to
hit-
do you really want to shake that stick
No,
at them?
See,
The
you target
Russians
an
are
open
already
area
doing
of
it.
land. You don't target, houses. You don't target, actual buildings. You
Right.
just target a spick of land right near the Kursk nuclear power plant.
Yeah.
And all I can say is, stop shelling our nuclear power plants. Otherwise, we're gonna shell yours.
Right, but see, that's the whole provoking mutually assured destruction.
The problem with the Russians are they love to surround their target
Mhm.
and basically close them in on all sides.
And
They
crush
love
it.
to they are overbearing. And if you
Yes.
don't give a response as overbearing or worse than the Russians, they won't back down.
See, I don't disagree with you. I agree with you. It's just my concern is mutually assured destruction is still the thing that's on everyone's lips when it comes to anything with a nuclear power, right?
We're not talking about using nuclear weapons. We're talking about shelling and artillery and missiles on nuclear power plants.
Which
Completely different
makes
type of
them
nuclear
dirty bombs.
reaction.
That's the problem. You see,
Exactly.
the concern of Zaporizhzhia is it turns into 6 giant dirty bombs. We
What
don't
you're
want
not
that.
getting is we cannot allow Russia to do acts like this and get away with it all the
Agreed.
time.
Absolutely
They're
agree.
as I've said before, they are pushing the envelope
Mhm.
so far until
To see what they
somebody
can get away
responds.
with.
Can get away with, one, and two, until someone responds even worse for them to say, maybe we might not want to do that.
Look, I don't disagree with you. All I'm saying is
Okay.
I'm trying to think like NATO right now. Somebody has to play devil's advocate, and I drew
know.
that short straw. My
The thing you're
concern
forgetting
as
about NATO
what?
I'm gonna be playing
is
devil's
it's
advocate.
being run by politicians,
Yes.
and politicians are weak, little, powerless men.
Yeah,
That's the
and here's the
problem.
other thing. Politicians are not willing to die.
So I want to stop
Well-
screen sharing that. But
Okay, well, the
Which
other
is
thing.
why NATO doesn't get involved.
Okay, well, you also kind of have to add is this.
Hang
We
on,
have
I
4
gotta fix the
directives
I
for
gotta fix this
nuclear
screen.
options: deterrence policies and nuclear deterrence policies for forces such as nuclear power plants. So, under NATO, if anything nuclear that
Mhm.
has been damaged or used inherently, let's say Russia affects one of the nuclear power plants, cracks it, and we have a Chernobyl effect.
Right.
That is not a declaration of war at any means necessary. That is still under, I
nuclear
think,
disaster.
exactly. So, based on what NATO's directives, mind you, there's 8 different NATO directives. The nuclear deterrence policy, there is the nuclear consultation,
Mhm.
there's also the nuclear
Proliferation.
nuclear evolution, nuclear natural policy.
Mhm.
So, based on those 4, even if Putin just decimates the whole nuclear structure, that is still not a declaration of war. Even if that nuclear waste or nuclear disaster affects all of Europe, because that still comes back to, was that act solely against all of NATO? No, it affects NATO. Yes, it does, but it is not an act of war.
Disagree.
It is not an
Completely
Well, no,
disagree because
well,
you're
no,
forgetting something. You're
based
forgetting
on what
something.
these directors, it
You're
doesn't.
forgetting military intent. Okay? That is if there was an accident, if Chernobyl's a good example of this, okay? That was an accident and a lot of people got sick. That was one thing.
Mhm.
That wasn't caused by someone deliberately trying to make the reactor go. Russia is using military come apart, okay? That
Mhm.
alone is a military act. That act has affected the lives of everyone in the nation that it hit. The fallout of all of that will affect all NATO nations of Europe. Did they get
Well,
directly attacked? No. Did they get sick because of an act because of a direct attack? Yes.
yeah,
NATO
but
would
see,
not
that's the detail.
NATO will not stand for that because the United
Well,
States would not let them not stand for that. They would say
I never
Maybe
said
that's
there.
Donald Trump
that's
was president,
bullshit. They would say fuck that. That's
but with Joe
bullshit.
Biden, no.
Not maybe
Okay,
under Joe Biden, but the rest of this country would not let him say no. You see,
The rest of this
think of how
country ain't
long
gonna care unless it personally affects us.
think of how long Woodrow Wilson withheld joining the war. Think of how long FDR ignored Adolf Hitler. Think of how long Chamberlain ignored Adolf Hitler trying to mend fences, okay? The peoples of those three nations said, "Fuck that, that's enough." And then the
well,
whole world had to get involved. Everybody got
well,
involved.
I'm playing devil's advocate here,
I know.
on based on the NATO's directive that they went up from 2018
Yeah.
to recent.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Based on that, there's a lot of leeway of saying, is that considered an act of war in any grand scope? Because you must first is considered a nuclear disaster, regardless if it is bombed inherently by any government. Mind
Uh-huh.
you, you must also consider that it is on a sovereign nation, which that
Do you know how I can guarantee you that they will consider it an act of war? Because they've never had to ask the question before. This is the first time this has happened. You're right. They have guidelines for this, but it has never been tested. And now it's
no, you're
potentially
right.
about to be tested. Let me give
But
you an
you
analogy. I'll give you a perfect
well,
analogy.
let me finish. Well, let
Go
me
ahead.
finish.
Go ahead.
Well, you also got to remember, it's never been done before. But we also cannot assume what they will do. That's also another assumption. This is all theories
No,
because
you
based
see, you can assume what they're going to do because it's just human psychology at this point. Okay? Let me give you this analogy. Okay? NATO,
Mhm.
is that a goat?
Yeah,
Okay. NATO,
of course, man.
oh,
Yes,
I
it's good.
heard it. That's all I'm saying. NATO is like a guy who had too much Indian food and
Uh huh.
he's in his car and he's got
Uh
to
huh.
get home and he's squeezing his cheeks and he's losing the battle. Okay? There's about to be a big accident in his pants, right?
Mm-hmm.
He gets out of the car, he's running towards his house, and a Russian stops him, shoves him on the ground, and starts kicking him in his ass, trying to force the grease out. Okay? That's exactly what's going on right now. NATO has these doctrines against belligerent nations attacking nuclear plants and stuff like that. That's what you're saying. That's like them holding back the diarrhea. And every time Russia fires another weapon or a shell at these plants, it's like them kicking NATO directly over their asshole, trying to get the thing to burst. Okay?
No, no,
When it
I agree.
bursts, when it bursts, NATO can't hold back the torrent of shit that's going to cover Russia's foot. And the rest of the world will not allow it. They're going to say, no, this happened because they did this. And they will pressure each individual nation's leaders in NATO to do something. That's the key words. Do something. Because if they do it to them, they'll do it to us. And your own doctrine says an attack on one nation of NATO is an attack on all of NATO. That's why I am sure that if this happened, they cannot stand back and just let it happen. Up until this point, because now you're talking about the lives of millions of people for radiation damage. You're talking generational poisoning. You're talking about wiping out the entire population of Europe's potential to repopulate itself for at least 60 years. Sterility, radiation sickness, just people dying off, cancers. I mean, look what happened to the people around Chernobyl. They
Or
can't have,
9 Mile.
yeah,
Nine
they
some.
can't have kids, or they have 5 eyeballs, or they have 3 testicles. You see what I'm saying? Like,
Oh no, no, I
that
know.
was all of the things that happened to Chernobyl was an accident, and it had that many implications. This is 6
That's because
times
the
bigger.
USSR lied to the people
Fine,
and didn't evacuate them.
fine, doesn't matter. It was still an accident. They didn't shell the reactor. This is 6 times potentially worse because of the size, and it's deliberately being attacked. That's the difference. And it's like the world can't sit back and go, well, we have these doctrines saying that it's really not an act of bullshit. That's my point. Bullshit. They popped off 6 fireworks with NATO holding them in their hands. They're gonna lose every finger on that fist. You see what I'm saying?
Disclaimer. I agree with you. I just want to play devil's advocate.
That's fine. That's fine. I mean, I'm glad you're doing it because these are the things I was hoping we would get into. Mutually assured destruction.
Because based on what I'm reading, it says NATO will take necessary steps to ensure credibility and effective safety and securing those assets that are nuclear, regardless of that is deterrence or nuclear in their mission. So, if you kind of abbreviating what the bottom will say, let's say, he does destroy one, nuclear fallout, and
Let me put that map
if
back up.
and if that, let's say we have a Chernobyl effect, pretty much. Let's just say we have another Chernobyl, except it was done deliberately, right?
Okay, sure.
Based on this, it's kind of in the weird zone because it says it doesn't allow for was it inherently done because due to war? Well, yes, but are you also going to allow that country to, contain that said nuclear disaster? Yes, you kind of have to. Will you go to war for that? And that also says, well, it depends. What is the situation at hand? And there's a lot of factors. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here in the aspect of NATO compared to 9/11, even though it was an attack against the United States, and yet, and we kind of attacked a country that isn't a country but a people and ideology. Well, we did NATO. We brought NATO. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
So that's my aspect. It's kind of hard because it's how could I say it? I know that there's a different response. I'm not trying to play stupid here.
I know.
But it seems like based on how these policies are written, they're almost leaving it in the wind saying.
They're giving themselves an out. I get that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
But see,
exactly.
Here's the thing. There's a saying that the mind can only take what the ass is willing to absorb, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is why I love Poland. Okay? If you look at that map, Chernobyl, the fallout, the 40 to 100 times the radiation of a normal human dose. Half of Poland is in there. Okay?
Yeah.
They will not allow their people to be exposed to that a second time. They will literally shove Jens Stoltenberg out of the way and say, get the fuck out of our way. We're going to handle this right now. You're either coming, and then they will say, are you with us or against us? Because if NATO says we can't back your play, then you're going to start seeing defections out of NATO, the likes you have never seen. Poland will
Mhm.
literally just go, "You are fucking useless. We're out." And
So
every
one of my
nation that agrees with Poland will do the same thing, and NATO will finally be proven to be useless and ineffective, and will cease to exist.
one of my professors made a great analogy in my opinion. He says, okay, he gave us all we were this geopolitical class. He
Sure.
says Poland is considered the mad dog of Europe. And I'm like, why the mad dog? Is it because
He's
they
fundamentally wrong right there. His argument's over right there, okay?
well,
Because
I finished?
he's wrong just from that one statement. Poland can't be the mad dog of anything. They were the whipping boy of Europe for 2 world wars. They have been
Okay, but
backed into a corner.
you
Remember
still
the
haven't let me finish.
that was in Poland.
I'm just saying,
Well, I
like, his
know.
one statement was completely just fucked right from the start.
Okay, but he's not going back to World War II, no nothing. He's just saying that if Russia oversteps,
Yeah.
Poland is there.
If Russia oversteps Poland, what?
If Russia ever does anything and it affects Poland, Poland is going to be there to attack it.
Right. Okay. Agreed. But
That-
see, that's the thing.
That is my point.
That's the thing, though. He's saying that Poland is a mad dog in the region because if it happens, they'll do that. But what he's also doing is he is feigning complete historical ignorance. Okay? The fact of the matter is he's not telling you why Poland is a mad dog. Okay? It's not that they want to be. It's because they were rats in a cage and they're tired of being victimized by everybody around them. They're not mad dogs. They're just not going to take it anymore. That there's a big difference. Mad dog implies that you are devoid of logic and reasoning. They're very logical. They're very reasonable. They have every tank NATO offers in their arsenal. That takes an analytical mind to say, yeah, we want all of it. Do you know why? Because they're the smartest people on the battlefield. They know all the strengths and all the weaknesses of all of our tanks. Do you want to fuck with those guys? No, because they know your weakness. They own your weakness. They own your strength. They're not mad dogs. They're geniuses. I've just become the fucking ambassador to Poland. Like those guys are probably like, we want him. He knows how we feel. Anyway. No, you know what? I'm glad you did that. I really am. Because I didn't want to just say, look, this is how I feel and there's no way around it. No, I want to be challenged. I just want to know if you guys think any differently, though. Like, would it drag us into a war? Yes or no?
No.
No.
You don't think
No.
so? You
Nope.
don't think this would drag NATO into a war?
Nope.
Scott?
They build
No.
they build an ivory tower that they don't care what it will affect. Because that's why they have these policies. If they didn't have these policies, I mean, it shows proof right there. We didn't enter Ukraine.
Okay. What good is being a NATO nation if the leaders of that NATO nation only think of themselves and their entire population die of radiation sickness?
Well,
You
you're
must
wrong.
is
Do
that
you
if
think
NATO
they
is
would
not
allow
a
it?
nation.
me, it is not for thee. If it does, if
Right, but
it attacks
the
France,
point is let's say you're right, Scott. It's not one nation, but I'm saying if you are a NATO nation, an ally in NATO, and your representative from your country falls in line with Jens Stoltenberg, and like you say, they sit in their ivory tower with their pinky in the air, okay? What good is that group if the whole population of the nation, that those people who fell in line with him, what good are they if their whole people die of radiation sickness? That means they are a representative of nothing because there's nothing left for them to represent. Do you think they're going to allow that? Or do you think the people who are getting sick and dying are going to pressure the representative to do or say something? Otherwise, they'll be hung upside down like Mussolini. You see what I'm saying? They're not going to let their representative sit in the ivory tower They're going to drag them down and put them in a tree on a rope. That's what I'm saying. The people will overpower that one representative that goes to the NATO meeting. Because that guy still has to come home. He doesn't stay in some fucking NATO hotel his whole life. He goes home. He goes to his home nation, and that's when they get him. Or he's got representatives who relay information back from home going, you're fucking up, you need to come home. Or you're fucking up, you need to push this because you're about to lose your job. Right? I know what you're saying. NATO's a boys club. I agree with you. But the people who put the representative of the boys club up there, they're not going to stand for it. They will demand something to be done. And they have to respond. They have to respond. Like you said, even if you agree that Poland's a mad dog of the war, if half of Poland is sick from radiation, do you think they're going to sit idly by and let themselves die without fighting back?
Well, no, your question was, will NATO do anything? I don't think NATO will do anything. I think it will be on the heels and the shoulders of those countries near there. That'd be their problem and their fight.
They're NATO nations, though, and Article 5 says that a NATO nation that's under attack or been attacked or been affected by an attack, an attack on one is an attack on all. That's their own doctrine.
I just showed you on here that's also nuclear options and nuclear strategically, that this is showing that just because something nuclear happens does not effectively do anything. There's a lot of, like, okay, if you're going to use that, not conclusion, but that argument, then you have to look at these nuclear options. And if I'm based on nuclear options, what I just read, no.
Right, but see, what I countered that with is you are correct in the case of Chernobyl, because Chernobyl was an accident. If the accident, or if the effects similar to that accident are 6 times larger and were deliberately created by acts of war, then the doctrine doesn't stick. See, like what you're saying is they have these nuclear doctrines saying that, look, it's not an act of war because it was an accident in Chernobyl's case, right? I would agree. I would say, okay, yeah, that wasn't somebody didn't fire a missile into Chernobyl to make that reactor go off that made a bunch of people sick. So NATO would say, look, that was an accident. It's a very tragic one, but this was not done by an attack. We can't respond because it wasn't an attack. I completely agree with that concept. But if this was 6 reactors blown up deliberately by Russian missiles and Russian bombs, okay, that's a cause and effect. The effect was the fallout. The cause was a deliberate act that caused this effect. NATO can't logic that out because it's like Ray fucking Charles and Stevie Wonder can see what caused it. Okay? They can't not say that was an act of war. They have to admit what it was. That was a deliberate attack. Now all of our people in our representative nations are sick because of it. That is Article 5 in a nutshell, because they have been affected by a deliberate act of war. There's no two ways about it. All that doctrine goes in the toilet immediately, because nobody is going to allow them to try to recite that. They're going to be like, are you fucking crazy? My wife has 3 eyeballs and she's puking green shit out every day because of this. Are you saying that the Russians didn't do this? Bullshit. Their missile hit that reactor and now my wife is puking green shit. Okay? That's cause and effect. NATO can't deny it.
The separatists did it.
Oh, the separatist answer to the president of Russia.
Well,
that is representation.
The separatist.
No, that is represented by the leader of that nation. If it was like Osama bin Laden, okay, I would agree with you. Because Osama bin Laden was not the leader of a nation. He was the leader of a terrorist group that flew a flag that was like a cancer that spread across many nations. I would 100% agree with you.
But the president of Russia can condemn the separatists for that act. It's not like that has ever been done.
That's not gonna fly because he directs the military who's currently attacking. He's just bullshitting the world by saying it's a special military operation. You just fucked up because you said it's a military operation.
He could also say, you know what, separatists hijacked me and, attacked the nuclear,
Bullshit.
and I
Bullshit.
condemn them. You never know.
No, I mean the world would just say bullshit because if he was influenced or under control, don't you think he would be a little bit more under, I don't know, distress?
Well, no, you're probably right, but I'm
This is
just
a
saying
dude who flew into fucking Iran and shook hands with the Ayatollah. That is not a man under distress.
He also has
That was a
Syrian
man making
fighters.
deals.
You also can blame it on the Syrians too, the Syrian fighters.
It doesn't matter. The point is he's still traveling freely and he's still shaking hands and kissing terrorist babies or whatever. He's making deals. That's not what a man under distress is doing. That's a man in control.
I didn't know you could kiss terrorist babies.
Well, I know. Figuratively speaking. I'm sure Jeffrey Epstein would have diddled a few and fucking Hillary Clinton would crush them into paste and take a bath in their stem cells or whatever, but gross.
So question,
yes.
I don't have any knowledge right now for what's happened as of yet.
Okay.
Has there been a reactor been taken down yet? I know they've been bombed.
This is the second event. The first event was back in March.
Oh no, I remember the first.
Right. There was a fire. Fire was put out. Very little radiation leakage. This time, it has been repeatedly bombed and shelled for several days. The UN is terrified right now. They're demanding a ceasefire so they can send in a multinational, basically nest team to go in there and inspect and make sure that things aren't about to go 3-eye. You know what I mean?
No.
So that's the whole reason I wanted to do this episode today, because when the UN is like, this is a dark day in European history because of what could happen, you tend to want to go, okay, let's dive into that a little deeper and see what the hell the deal is. So I mean, yes, that's okay. We've literally done a real war room today, because I'm talking about implications of war, who's going to join it, how's it going to be played, who's going to move the pieces, things like that, right? That's what a war room meeting is like. So we finally did one. It only took 170 days of this war to get to sit here and speculate like this. Now, if you're in the audience, bear in mind, none of us are generals, none of us are military strategists. We're just going off of what we can see, what we can read, what we've learned in history, what we may or may not know. Maybe some of you know more than we do, and you're free to comment, and critique or agree or whatever.
Or give us your own perspective.
Right, because this whole thing was just to start the conversation. I just wanted to talk about it. Because
I just wanted to be the devil's advocate, that's all.
No, that's fine, dude. I'm happy you did. I really am. Because I didn't want this to be just a one-sided, okay, this is the way it is, and everyone agrees, right? Okay, cool. No, I wanted this. I wanted challenge. I wanted different perspective. Like Mike brought up great subjects on alternative responses. I'm not saying I disagree with them. I'm just I played the devil's advocate on that part of this show because I thought, mutually assured destruction's a big deal.
Don't get me wrong. I don't want to see any fallout, period, regardless. Right. But the only way Russia stops or Russia takes a moment to think is if they get an equal amount or an even worse response than what they've given.
And I agree with you on that. Let's just talk about a domestic issue quickly here. We tend to lean towards the right. We can't deny that. And we tend to sort of turn away from the ideologies of the far left. That also cannot be denied. One thing that I've probably said many times is, if you've watched the Summer of Love, and I say that very sarcastically, what I mean is the radical left run wild, burning cities and protesting bullshit. The only thing that those people, like Pantifa and anyone else who's got their panties in a wad, the only thing they respond to and understand is the very thing that they do themselves, violence. You cannot reason with them. They are unreasonable people. So you're right. If Russia attacks nuclear plants, then it would stand to reason that Ukraine could set a message to Russia saying, "Hey, two can play that game too. Are you sure you want to open up this Pandora's box because this leads to mutually assured destruction?" I 100% agree with you. I just don't think
Is he
it's a
ref-
wise tactic.
is he referring to like Ukraine setting off their own?
No, he's saying that if Russia attacks Zaporizhzhia, then
Uh huh.
Ukraine should attack the plants at Kursk on the Russian side. You see what I'm saying?
Hmm.
You attack a Ukrainian plant, fine, we'll strike a Russian one. So it's a tit for tat because it's the only thing that Russia would understand. And I can't disagree. I can't fault your logic. I agree with your logic. It's just tit for tat when it comes to nuclear destruction. That's a very dangerous game. Like,
It
do you
is.
do you really want to play that game?
The thing is, in my opinion, this is only in my opinion. Um, I don't think he will. I don't think he would use nukes or in this case power plants. I think a mediator to get his point across is chemical weapons.
This is a guy who did that already in Syria.
No, that's what I'm saying.
But do you
He
know
already.
what the difference is? He
Uh,
used chemical weapons in Syria because
mhm.
he was on a timetable. This time,
Oh,
he has
yes.
taken catastrophic amounts of losses of life and military equipment and munitions, bullets, bandages, and blood. Okay? He has lost so much failing in his military goals. This is a guy who's on edge now because he's not getting the results he wants. Will he go chemical first? Maybe, because he's done it before when he lost so much less. How much did he actually lose in Syria? Not much, because he proxied through Syrians, right? And he just sort of gave them chemical weapons to use, right? That's the allegation. Whereas in
Yeah.
this, he's lost tens of thousands of troops. He's lost hundreds of billions of dollars or rubles in military equipment. How many years or decades do you think it's going to take Russia to rebuild everything it's lost in the inventory and the human factor when this is over? You see what I'm saying? His legacy is going to be that he has ruined his country for the next 50 years, maybe longer. Because think about it like this. When communism fell, Russia became a first world nation practically overnight because billionaires sprung out of nowhere, right? And it was like, look, capitalism was great. We saved Russia. The West has won. The Cold War is over. And everyone was like, great, right? Now you have this one balding, sawed off little prick poking the bear of nuclear war for what? A dying wish to have the Cold War map of 1963 back before he dies? What fucking stupid, selfish goal is that? Did he think about what's going to happen to his people? When he
He doesn't care.
loses, not if, when he loses, and when Russia is defeated, militarily, not all the people, because there's plenty of good people in the country, okay, I'm going to be fair. But when they are categorically, militarily, and economically defeated, not only will the good people of Russia resent the West because now they're being punished, but they're going to go from a first world country that was full of billionaires to a third world shithole that will be punished and sanctioned for generations as reparations for the war that their leader provoked. You see what I'm
Similar
saying?
to a Versailles Treaty,
Huh?
like a Versailles Treaty where
Yes, yeah,
Germany.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. No, I agree. I agree with you on that one.
And I think Scott, you know the name of this. I always forget. It's that piece of Poland that got taken over.
Not Crimea.
Mike, do you know?
Yeah, give me a second. Hold on. It's at the tip of my tongue.
You look it up.
I'm gonna look it up right now.
All right, that piece. If this all goes, and Russia's defeated, Poland gets that back, without. There's no negotiating that. Crimea goes back to Ukraine. Kaliningrad, thank you. Kaliningrad is going to be forfeit back to the Polish, back to the Estonians, whoever that originally belonged to. I'm almost certain of it. Crimea, obviously, Russia is expelled from Crimea forever, right? That's guaranteed. And then Zelensky, being the statesman he has been so far, will probably not make a demand for any part of Russian land. I seriously doubt it. He doesn't seem like the type.
I disagree.
What do you think he wants?
I think he's gonna want it to symbolize a piece of territory. I don't know what, but okay. You gotta think. Imagine Zelensky, because I think he's the most real president of Ukraine that has seen so far.
Very charismatic,
because
yes.
Yeah, but more human, because most of them are in for the money.
He had humble beginnings.
Exactly, but my point is, I feel like he would take it. He would say, "You know what? I want that piece of territory because I want to mark it in the history books, saying that I."
Do you know why I know that's not going to happen? He's already said so.
Really?
Yes, he has already said that he has no intention to march into Moscow and execute Putin. He also said that he doesn't want anything but what was taken from him. Which means he only wants Crimea back. For his part of the war, he wants all the Russians out, and he wants Crimea back because it was his in the first place. That's all he said. He's been on the record for that. He's been on the record.
That's very modest. I did not know that.
Yeah.
I yield. I did not know. That's very modest of him.
But the rest of NATO is going to be like, no, fuck that. Kaliningrad goes to Poland. Like, they're not going to let that just go, right? They're going to be like, no, you have inconvenienced all of us. Kaliningrad is no longer yours. Like, fuck you, get out. You are never going to be Europe now.
So, okay, I have to add this.
Go ahead.
So, just wondering, okay, let's say, for the sake of theorizing,
sure,
a nuclear power plant is destroyed.
Okay.
Do you think that China, mind you, I know you said we're not going to talk about China. I just wanted to add this tidbit to see what you think.
Sure.
China is going to get involved. Let's say they're already doing their thing in Taiwan. Let's just say that.
Okay.
So
the CTO.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm just trying to add a little bit into this because I know we're kind of going to the end already, but I just want to add it a little bit.
Sure.
Saying like a nuclear power plant is fucked, and Taiwan is currently being bombarded or being invaded at this current moment, let's say.
Okay.
You think China is going to support Russia against let's say, Article 5 and the NATO initiative?
No.
It might.
The problem is China doesn't back a loser. That's the problem. They will... See, in the very beginning of this, I might have said yes. But the way I've seen the way Xi Jinping has been behaving, when this all started, he was very vocal about his support for Russia. And anything they need, he said, take care of it because they're strong allies, right? And I thought, okay, that looks fine. That was when Russia said that they were going to have Ukraine brought to heel within 72 hours.
Right.
When it went 3 months in,
you said that Taiwan that China will invade Taiwan.
Exactly. See that detail?
And then they saw how condemned Russia got for attacking Ukraine.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, we cannot economically or financially handle attacking Taiwan and getting this amount of fallout that Russia's getting with Ukraine.
Exactly.
See, the
problem is before all this war started, China saw Russia as the bigger of the two powers. I think. I feel that way. Militarily
you're right.
They probably thought
Chinese.
They were like, hey, no matter what we do in Taiwan, Russia's got our back because they're the nuclear bear. That's what they thought. because
what they
they
thought.
thought they were told, don't worry, we're going to handle this shit in Ukraine in 72 hours, and then you can do your Taiwan thing, and if you need us to help you, we'll help you. And China was like, hell yeah. They probably had like an E-boner you wouldn't believe, right? All 3 inches were up there. Anyway, what happened is after 3 months of this war, China's like, Jesus Christ, Russia's
Their
down to
butts
their...
whooped.
That's like, Russia's down to their third string already. Maybe we're... You know what? We're stronger than them. We don't... Fuck them. We don't need them. That's what China's doing right now. They're looking at Russia going, you guys are chumps. We thought you were the big dog. We're the big dog. You cup our balls now. Right? That's probably what's going on. But like you said,
No. I
like
just
you
want.
said,
I just want to add. I just want to add this because I know.
if
Because
they
I know the
attack...
current situation in Taiwan.
See, the thing with China is, I guess we're going to get into this for a bit. The thing with China that's really amazing is the amount of complacent non-support they're getting. I know that sounds contradictory.
What do you mean? Complacent non-support?
See, it sounds weird, right?
No, yeah, that's what I'm wondering. So, what do you mean by that? Because I heard that before, but I don't know if you're applying this.
China is the world's manufacturer of cheap labor. They are. No denying it, right? Look at 99% of the things in your house made in China, right?
No, yeah, that is very
The
true.
whole world has gotten fat, lazy, complacent,
On the Chinese
and
tip,
comfortable by basically slave labor of China. We have heard about
Essentially.
their working conditions and their human crises and all. We know all this. And yet, you know what? Complacency. The entire world turns a blind eye so they can have their dollar store shit for $1.
Well, a perfect example of this is that they're even kidnapping Vietnamese women to supply in China because their low rate of women.
And their
Exactly.
high mortality rate, correct?
Exactly. Yes, there's a large
So
ring.
here's what has to happen though. Russia gets categorically defeated eventually. That's destiny.
Yes.
That's destiny. I'm sorry. That's destiny. And it's not against the Russian people. I have to keep saying that, okay? I'm just talking about militarily and economically to support
You're
the military.
separating the regime against the people.
Yes, because there's so many
No,
people
I agree
within
with
that
you.
country who have been jailed or tortured or quietly executed for being against it. We've heard of this already. We know this. There are good people everywhere. There's just bad leaders. So let's say Russia is categorically defeated. China no longer has an ally. China can try to attack Taiwan in its fleeting attempt to try to take it back over for whatever reason.
They're gonna get the same backlash that Russia did.
The thing I'm concerned with is I don't think this is almost like what Jaime was saying about NATO not wanting to do something. I don't think the world is ready to give up China. And what I meant by that was complacent non-compliance. They don't want to give up their cheap labor source. They still won't do it. China can go in and execute every single person in Taiwan and leave it a giant island cemetery. They can go in and they can attack all of Micronesia. They can attack all of Indonesia. They can attack Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam. They could spread like the Japanese Empire did. And I think most of the world will still just complacently turn a blind eye. Because as long as they can have their dollar store shit for $1, they're going to continue to turn a blind eye. Because they haven't given it up yet. After all the shit we heard about Uyghurs and about human atrocities and about how fucked up Hong Kong turned after they turned it back over to the communists, and now what they're doing to Taiwan, and yet people keep buying shit made in China anyway, you have to wonder, profit over principle? Yeah, pretty sure that's what it is. And you know how hard that is for me to say? My boss is Cantonese. Okay? I've worked for him for 20 years. Even he thinks this is fucked up. He's like, it's really hard to be Chinese right now. And I'm like, I get it. I understand. I'm like, it's hard for you to talk about it, and it's hard for you to identify with it or to distance yourself from it. Because you got to remember, a lot of the stuff that we get comes from them. A lot of the stuff my shop gets is manufactured over there. So it's like, how do we handle that? How do we deal with that? It's not an easy question. But if the whole world can sit there and go, we're cutting ties with you. Sorry, we don't need to do cheap labor anymore. First of all, yeah, there's going to be a global recession because now everyone has to domestically produce. But then if you think of the long-term aspect of that, that's actually better for every nation because they forgot what it's like to be self-sufficient. A lot of nations forgot how to be self-sufficient. I mean, a lot of nations can't produce certain things because they've either never done it or they've never learned how to do it or they've just become so dependent on China to do it for them that they would be hopeless without them. It won't end until the world says enough. You know, we're always like, buy American, build American. Well, once upon a time, after World War One, there was a wounded and dopey little Bohemian corporal who said the same thing. And I know this is going to sound perilously close to Nazism, but one day this Bohemian corporal got sick of watching his fellow countrymen being punished by the Versailles Treaty and being sanctioned to death. And he was like, you need to stop being ashamed for the crimes of your fathers, from the wars of your fathers. And it's time to stop being so dependent on what the rest of the world thinks of us. It's time to build German. It's time to be proud to be German again. Make Germany great again, I guess, at the time. Which I know is scary that I'm even trying to draw that parallel, but once upon a time there was a guy who was sick of being beaten down, and he was like, let's just focus on us for a while. Now, granted, he took it to an extreme, and he was surrounded by propagandists and psychos, and he had Parkinson's disease, and he was easily influenced, and he was a mass murderer and all that. But you have to admit, in the very beginning, before he was arrested from the beer hall push, the guy wasn't wrong. And the whole world can actually learn from just that part of his history. You can build things that you need in your own country. You can stop being so dependent on cheap labor. And you can actually better your own nation by becoming self-reliant. Everything that we need in this country, we can make it here. We can farm it here. We can build it here. It might cost a little more to do it. But then we can sit there and go, we didn't depend on anyone else, and we couldn't be extorted by anyone else because we can do it ourselves. And once the world starts thinking like that, China becomes a non-issue. Because now everyone is self-sufficient, and then the only negotiating that has to be done is trade deals. Hey, you guys make BMWs, we make Chevrolets. We'd really like to have some of your BMWs. Would you like to have some of our Chevrolets? Stuff like that, right? It's not that we both build cars. It's just we like yours and you like ours. That's different. See, China, we don't look over at China and go, we like Chery Motors. No, far from it. We're like, dude, no way. That would even pass our safety standards. So it's like, why can't we do that with everything else? We can. We just choose not to. Because profit over principle. That's got to go. That alone has to go. Then China doesn't become such a big issue anymore. Because you got to remember, their military, untested. Untested on a grand scale. They're becoming more confident and more aggressive. And they think they can handle it. But you know, you don't know what kind of soldier you are. You don't know what kind of soldier you're going to be until the shooting starts that actually matters. I don't know what kind of soldier I would be. I mean, I could tell you what kind of human being I am because I was actually rescuing people during Hurricane Harvey, and I got shot at, and I responded by shooting back. I didn't cower, I didn't run, I didn't abandon my boat. I stood up and fired 3 rounds towards the sound. Granted, the sheriff standing next to me stood up and fired a couple of rounds out of his pistol, too. The National Guardsman, on the other hand, he fell out of the boat, shocked.
Because he didn't realize
He didn't realize I was shooting a
45-70.
45-70. He thought it was a 30-30. But, you know, the point stays the same. You don't know what you're going to be until you start shooting when it matters or getting shot at when it matters. China thinks that they can handle this war, but they've never been in one. Not in modern times and not to this degree. So maybe they can handle it, but they're not going to know until someone starts shooting back at them. Then all of a sudden they're going to realize, ooh,
Maybe we shouldn't have started
we
that.
were just kidding.
Mm.
Anyway, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Shall not be infringed.
Okay. Scott, do you have anything you want to maybe give us some perspective on, or do you think we pretty much beat this horse to death? Or did he...
I think it was sleep.
Maybe. I don't know. It's been a long day. He does work pretty hard. Well, okay, so we were going to do this for only an hour. It's an hour and 41. Sorry about that, guys. I thought this was a very interesting type of episode and format, and if you guys in the audience that took the time to watch it thinks it was kind of cool and you'd like to see stuff like this maybe more often instead of just me reading the stories of the week to you, I'm open to that. The show prep's a little bit different. We can probably change how we did this particular one, but
I was prepared though.
you were very prepared, and I'm glad you did it. And what do you think? Like, was this kind of a neat thing to do?
As I told you before, the past couple weeks,
Hmm.
you can go over what happened, and that's great. But
Yeah.
as I said before, that we may want to have a commentary piece where we just discuss an article,
Sure.
get as a roundtable type situation
Like
in
this.
the war room, because that's what a real war room does.
Yeah.
They talk about different scenarios. They talk about
Plotting
the
and planning.
sides and whatnot. Yes.
Yeah.
So,
I like it. I like it. And I think if we have another opportunity to do it, we should definitely take it. It's just the news this week was sparse, but I saw the repeating theme of this nuclear thing, and I'm like, you know what? We should probably talk about that. So that's why I did that.
mhm.
All right, well, fine. We'll try to do that. Anyway, let me play this because now we're at 142, and I think by the time I'm done with this outro, it'll be 145. So anyway, I want to thank you, Mike, you, Scott, and you, Jaime, who disappeared for whatever reason, for being here, and you guys that were watching in the live chat today, which wasn't very active, but then again, I did drop this sort of on short notice. But yeah, if you caught it on the replay, that's cool too. This was the War Room. If you like what you see, hit the like button. Maybe share it with somebody else who you think might enjoy this. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do that, because the thousanding of Sean Pwnery is actually not too far away from the way things have been growing. So anyway, I want to thank you all to take the time to watch. I didn't do any penny arcades this week just because I didn't know what I wanted to record. But we'll be back next week for the War Room in some form or fashion. And, yeah, maybe I'll be able to do penny arcades again or something for this Sunday. But Slava Ukraini,
Heroyam Slava.
and we'll see you next week.
Shall not be infringed.